Okay, great to see everyone. Happy Hanukkah, happy Erev Shabbos. It is Friday, and so we will do a Rashi from the sixth Aliyah today. A famous Rashi, a well-known Rashi, but I think one that's worth thinking about a little bit. In the sixth Aliyah, we have the whole incident between Yosef and Eshes Potiphar. Of course, as we learned earlier in the Parsha, after Yosef is brought down to Egypt, he starts to work in Beis Potiphar, this important person's house in Egypt. But in our Aliyah, Eshes Potiphar starts to make advances towards Yosef and tries to seduce him in some way. And Yosef continuously refuses, as you see at the beginning of the Aliyah, Vayechar advarim ha'ela, Vatisa Eshes adonav es eineha el Yosef, v'tomer shich va'imi. She's very blunt, she's very open. She says, I want to be with you, Yosef, come and sleep with me. And of course, you have the shalshelis here, the very important trup note on Vayima'en. He refuses. Vayima'en. Only a few times in the Torah, it's a sign of hesitation. The shalshelis says, stop, everything stopped. Vayima'en was a hard stop for Yosef. He absolutely refused. But then she continues her efforts, and she continues to go towards him. Vayhi kayom hazeh, pasuk yud aleph, vayavo habayisa lasos malachto. Yosef comes home one day to engage in the work that he had to do in the home. Ve'ein ish me'anshei habayis sham babayis. She seizes her opportunity. There's no one else. The two of them are alone. And what does she do? Vatispesehu bebigdo. She grabs his clothing, literally, doesn't let him escape. She grabs him by the clothing, or maybe rips off his clothing, whatever it is. Lemor shichva imi. So she's upping the ante a little bit in terms of her seduction. But what does he do? Vayazov bigdo biyada. He just walks right away. He leaves, symbolically speaking, perhaps actually speaking, leaves his clothing in her hand. Vayanas vayetze achutza. And he literally runs outside to escape her. And of course, the whole story continues from there. But of course, his refusal is critically important over here. He's a symbol of kind of the moral upstanding character. He's Yosef Hatzadik. He's the person who's never flawed, who never errs. But Rashi, through the eyes of Chazal here on our pasuk, reveals to us what the strength of Yosef was in this moment, where he derived his strength from to rebuff all these advances, not just in terms of, his physical desires, but also in terms of pleasing his boss and not making trouble for himself. All these potential desires he could have had to go through with what Eshes Potiphar was suggesting, and yet he withheld all that. He held himself back, and his strength derives from the following. Rashi quotes a machlokes from the Gemara in Sota. Rav Ushmuel, two Amoraim, argue about what Lasos Malachto meant. He comes home that day to do his work. Chad Amar Malachto Mamish. One says he came home to do his actual work in the home that he was hired to do. V'chad Amar Lasos Tzurachav Ima. But the other one, Rav or Shmuel, says that actually what he was coming home that day was euphemistically to do his work, but really he was trying to be with Eshes Potiphar. He was finally giving in to his desires. Yosef Hatzadik, the great, righteous, pristine, saintly character, was about to fall. He was about to give in to his desires. He couldn't withstand the pressure anymore. So what caused him to stop? What caused him to run out of the house? Yazov Bigdo, Vayanas Vayetze Achutza, El Sheniras Lo Dumus Diukno Shel Aviv. He saw the image of his father in his mind. Now, it's a shorthand version here in Rashi, but if you click here, we'll go to the actual Gemara in Sota, where it elaborates a little bit further on this story. Vatispeseu bebigdo lemor. She grabs his clothing, he leaves the clothing behind and runs out. Ba'osasha basa diukno shel aviv v'nirasa lo b'chalom. At that exact moment, an image of his father comes and appears to him in the window. What does his father say to him in this image, this dream? Amar lo, Yosef, atidin achecha she'kasfu al avnei ephod, v'ata beinehem. You and your brothers, Yosef, are going to have your names inscribed on the eventual breastplate of the Kohen Gadol. Each tribe had a stone with their name inscribed in this holy place, in this holy manner. V'ata beinehem, you're going to be one of those stones. Ritzoncha, sheyimcha shimcha mi beinehem, v'tikra roe zonos. Do you really want your name to be erased from your precious stone in that precious place, the place of meeting between me and the Jewish people for all eternity? You want your name to be erased and you to be called Roe Zonos, the shepherd of harlots? That's what you want your name to be written on there? So pretty powerful words, pretty harsh accusation that Yaakov in this vision levels at Yosef. And of course, Yosef is convinced in that moment. And the basic idea of this Gemara conveyed here by Rashi is that Demus Dyukno of Aviv, his image of his father, conveyed to him, think more about your future than about this present moment. Yosef, if you're going to give in, you're going to be gaining something in the short term, but losing something much more precious in the long term. Think of your life, think of your future, think of all you want to accomplish. This little blip could ruin that. Don't give in to the pressure right now. That's an important lesson to think about in general. But what really interested me about this Rashi and about this Gemara is not the words that Yaakov says to convince Yosef to stop. And that self is interesting, as I just said, but rather the idea of Dumus Diukno Shel Aviv Bachala. The idea that aside from any words he said to him, the idea that the image of his father appeared to him in that moment and kept him on the straight and narrow is something that I think is precious. The idea that the images of those we trust, of those we love, of those what we look up to, that the images of our past, our personal past, our national past, come and appear to us in a moment and can direct us into the right path of life is something really, really important to think about. Who are those images that we have in our mind? Who are the voices that we have in our ears that continue to whisper us? We all need inspiration. We all need to be uplifted. We all need to be saved as we're going down the wrong hole, as we're going down the wrong path, as we're about to give in to our desires and to do something that we really don't want to do deep down. We all need help. And sometimes we get help from those around us, but sometimes we just get help mentally and subconsciously from the image that we have in our mind. The image of someone we look up to, as I said, the image we have of ourselves and who we want to be. But the image that we construct in our mind that comes to us in those moments can be a very, very powerful force. And I was thinking about that as we go forward into Hanukkah. As we light the Hanukkah candles, we also have an image in our mind, and that's the image of the Chashmonayim, the image of the Maccabim, the image of the menorah and the Beis Hamikdash, and the small cruse of oil. It's not just the images of people, and it's not just the images that come to us in moments where we're going to do something wrong, but it's also the images of the events of our past, the events of Jewish history that come to us, not in a moment of crisis, but in a moment of positivity that can continue to lift us and inspire us. The same way that Yaakov, in that image, in that moment, had a powerful effect upon Yosef, other images can have a powerful effect upon us in the positive sense as well. So we light those candles as we think about the images of the heroes of our past. They can really inspire us and lift us to be better and to try harder and to achieve great things in our world. And that's really what the holiday of Hanukkah is all about. It's a holiday of Re'iyah. It's a holiday of sight. We see the candles. Sight is supposed to trigger something in our mind, just as it did for Yosef. In Yosef's case, he was going in a bad path and it had to save him. We're not necessarily going in a bad path. We don't need to necessarily be saved, but we can also be uplifted by images, and we can also be uplifted by the sights that we see as we light those Hanukkah candles. Wish you all a Chag Chanukah Sameach, Chag Urim Sameach, and Shabbat Shalom.